We're on part number 3 of a study that we have entitled The Providence of God. And what we're trying to do is simply explain why we do not believe that the word luck or its related concepts should have anything to do with the believer. If we know that God is in charge and that God is in control, then it's not random chance or some other force or intelligence that is providing for us and guarding our lives. It's God. And so therefore, when you talk about luck, you're talking about something that Lucifer or simply blind fate is doing, and we cannot accept that. So we should steer clear of saying, well, that person had a stroke of good luck, or boy, that was sure bad luck. Or perhaps we should use what T.J. Jakes, he's a colored evangelist, and I've listened to him a couple of times, and he's coined the word blessed. Boy, that piano fell from the 10th floor and just fell right there and missed you by about 10 feet. Others would say, well, boy, that was a stroke of good luck. We would say, nope, you were blessed. Or even more accurate, what the Word of God says, you were graced out, or graced to the maximum. God kept you alive for a purpose. If you're an unbeliever, that purpose is to get saved. If you're a carnal believer, to get right. If you're a mature believer, to keep on cranking out doctrine to His glory. So that simply means that when we believe in the providence of God, we believe that He supernaturally, through 3 things, His omnipresence, His omniscience, and His, I'm going through the 3 omni words here. His omnipresence, His omniscience, and omnipotence can control history and circumstances, so that all of the events and all of the elements of these 2 things can be brought together at the right time, at the right place, for the right person to bless them. And that is an important concept. Now, it's not for all. These special blessings, as far as working all things for good, are only to those who love Him. The second commandment has to do with those who hate Him and those who love Him. And He says He shows mercy to those who love Him. Romans 8:28 says He works all things for good to those who love Him. But on the other hand, people might have things good in this life. However, those things, as good as they are in their place, are working together for bad. And we'll show you a couple of laws as to just how bad it is and why it's so bad. And that is the spin of history. Might call it the Wheel of Fortune. Okay, well, or not. All right, now I had a question with regard to, well, if you don't believe in luck, and this is just a quick rabbit's trail, we will develop these things later on. But if you don't believe in luck, what about games of chance? Okay, well, let me tell you something. All of us have won at games of chance. However, it wasn't luck that made us win. You know what it was? Mathematical probabilities and percentages. Let's take a game of cards. Cards could be classified as a game that has a percentage of chance and a percentage of skill. You have to know how to hold your mouth right, have a poker face, as it were, and so that takes a little bit amount of skill. You draw 4 aces, you don't say, oh, wow-wee, and so forth. You don't want to let your opponents know what you have. So there's skill in knowing how to arrange the cards and play the cards, using a game from my past where I won a little and lost a little and the like. However, it is mainly a game of chance and mathematical probabilities. There are 52 cards in a deck. And depending on how many players you have, it is, excuse the phrase, the luck of the draw. It's what card is next in the draw that you just happen to get that matches this card and this card that you can play together and win. So, did some mystical force make those 4 aces appear in your hand? Or was it simply the fact that this person drew a card, this person drew a card, this person drew a card, this person, and you were dealt 3 aces already, and the next card in the pile was an ace, so you got the 4th card. That's not luck. That is mathematical probability and percentages. That's all that it is. No mystical force, no supernatural power, no charmed life made those 4 cards appear in your hand. It's just simply the way that it is. For example, if you're going to spin the wheel, I like the game Wheel of Fortune on television, and it too is a game of all chance and skill. Chance in that you get it and you spin the wheel. And it just so happens it missed bankrupt and it hit $10,000 and so forth. That's chance. But in actuality, did some little demon sit on that wheel and stop it right at $10,000 so that you could be blessed? Did you have your lucky rabbit's foot on and somehow it charmed that wheel so that those amounts of money and so forth, you didn't hit lose a turn, you didn't hit bankrupt and so forth? No, it's simply mathematical probabilities and percentages. That's the way it is. The skill comes in where you guess the letters and put together the phrase or title or whatever it is. And if you're smart enough to recognize them and say what it is. So luck does not play any part. It's just simply the probabilities. This particular number is going to be landed on so many times during the course of the game, or it's not going to be landed on, or what have you. So when you talk about luck or bringing the luck bringing you good fortune and winning at any particular game, it is not luck at all. It's just that Satan wants you to believe that. See, you pay homage to him, and what does he do? He makes that wheel stop right there for you. And all the forces of nature are focused right on you and are drawn attention to you so that you will be blessed by luck, chance, random, fate, or luck in giving deference to him. But once more, it is not luck at all. It's not a lucky guess. It is not a lucky spin of the wheel. It is not a lucky draw. It's simply the mathematical probabilities that you happen to be the person that drew that card or what have you. So the next time you feel lucky, you might as well forget it, because there is no such thing. Satan, and except when he is allowed of God in the testing of Christ, in the testing of Job, and so forth, Satan cannot control your circumstances for blessing as such. There is an element, of course, where he can. There's an element where temporarily he can give you blessing, but it cannot be sustained. It cannot last. Now, let's go then to another and by the way, the reason that I drew that there is because somebody had asked, well, are all games of chance wrong? And the answer to that is absolutely not. If you're going to play most games, there are very few that are all skill. Even if you are a chess player, which takes a whole lot of skill, your opponent can make a dumb move. Well, what is that? Well, that's a chance. Excuse my phraseology. I hate to use that, but it's an opportunity. Perhaps that would be euphemistically acceptable. It's an opportunity to make your move, to go in for the kill, to win in the game of chess. It's not wrong to play cards. It's not wrong to play dominoes. It's not wrong where you pick things from a pile and just happen to get a certain set of numbers and so forth. Games of chance are not in and of themselves wrong, but you just simply have to understand that it is not luck that has brought you that good hand. It is not luck that has brought you these particular dominoes or whatever that allows you the capability to win. It is mathematical probabilities and percentages. You just simply happen to be sitting in the right place at the right time and drew these. Okay, but now we're getting into something a little more definite here. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse number 32. We're going to just simply take a quick look at grace. Verse number 32 says this, "For ask now of the days that are past, which were before thee, since the day that God created man on the earth." The first thing that God does for mankind is give us living grace. We know that that comes from the Lord Jesus Christ. Turn there quickly to John chapter 1. John chapter 1. In John 1 we find, verse 1, "In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Same was in the beginning with God. Now, all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made." We read in Genesis chapter 2 that God, and we find that it's Christ, that's the member of the Godhead, who breathed into man's nostrils the breath of life after he formed his outer shell called the body. Now, indirectly, all of us therefore were created by Jesus Christ. We owe our life now, our living, because Jesus Christ did that to our original forefather, Adam. Now, in another sense, of course, we owe Jesus Christ our life, because at the point of birth, we had biological life, but we did not have suke life or soul life. And at the point of birth, we've studied this before, we get that imputed by the Lord. He gives us this life so that we come alive. Now, we have to learn later on, we have to grow up and that sort of thing. But initial life, the spark of life, the substance of the soul, the substance of the body is given us by Jesus Christ. And therefore, that is a grace. We did not earn it. We did not deserve it. But yet, in eternity past, he thought the idea of having you alive for him would be something special. And so, you are a testimony to the fact that he thought of you, and in his providential foresight, provided for your life. You are alive right now because of God's providence. Okay, let's go to the book of Colossians chapter 1. The book of Colossians chapter 1. And in verse number 16. Again, pointing to the Lord Jesus Christ as the Creator. "For by him were all things created in heaven and earth, visible and invisible." Now, by the way, your body is a visible creation of Jesus Christ. Your soul is an invisible creation of the Lord Jesus Christ. However, I can see your soul manifested through your body, the life that you have now in the flesh. But both realms were created by the Lord. You are experiencing both realms. You are a soul, you possess a soul, and you also have a body. He made them all. Their thrones, dominions, all things were created by him and for him. All right, now that is living grace. But now we're going to move down to sustaining grace. He is before all things, and by him all things consist. Now, that's an important concept. Just because you have matter floating in space, you have to have somebody to form it and to hold it together. How come your body just doesn't explode? How come we're all not just some sort of gases out there floating, a nebula or what have you? Simply because Jesus Christ not only formed it, but he said, hey, I'm going to hold it together. So you are sustained in your form and existence by Jesus Christ. We're told how this is done in Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. So the second grace that you have, that is God's providence, is sustaining grace. Verse 3. Who being the brightness of his glory, the express image of his person, and here is the phrase we want, upholding all things by the word of his power. The pew that you are sitting on right now is held together molecularly by the Lord Jesus Christ. All of the atoms, everything, it sticks together so that it remains solidarity. It is something that you can trust to sit on, that's not going to fall through, break apart, or what have you. Jesus Christ is sustaining it. And he does this with all of creation that has a certain form and consistency and so forth. So that's the second type of grace. Now, let's go to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. The next type of grace is logistical grace. And logistical grace, as well as sustaining grace and living grace, are all things that are enjoyed by believer and unbeliever alike. Who's holding together an unbeliever? Jesus Christ, whether they want to admit it or not. Who gave the unbeliever body and soul life? Jesus Christ, whether they want to admit it or not. They don't want to admit it because all things were made by him and for him, and they do not want his lordship in their life, so they don't admit it. They concoct things like evolution and the like. Now, the thing is, they enjoy living grace, they enjoy sustaining grace, and they also enjoy logistical grace. Now, mind you, it's usually in the area of logistical grace that they give the word luck to. They always want good luck in the area of logistical grace, meaning to earn more money or to have more possessions. But even in the area of logistical grace, whether a person has a lot or a little, it still comes from God's providence and not from Lucifer. Lucifer cannot make stones bread, but God can. Lucifer cannot make the universe. Lucifer could not make another angel, but God can. And that's the whole point. It is ludicrous to revolt against the God who not only created you, but is sustaining you, and in an ongoing progressive way. That's logistical grace. And yet that's exactly what Lucifer and his angels and the world is doing. They're revolting against the God who gave them life, who sustains their life, and who keeps them living. What a weird thing to do. Matthew chapter 5, verse number 45. That ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he makes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust. Now, these are normal circumstances, seasonal circumstances, a harvest, planting and harvest circumstances, sowing and reaping. What do you need mainly for a good crop? Well, you need the sun to come up, and the plants need a little bit of sun, and then you need for it to rain from time to time so the plants can get their water. Now, sometimes because there are people and collectively who reject the grace of God, there are pockets of heathenism where, like over in Africa, God doesn't send rain, but he sends them a whole lot of sun. Well, that's not a blessing. That brings famine, and people begin starving. But if you go back in history, all the way back to that point, you'll find that God sent them message after message of His grace, sent His gospel about His Son, and they rejected it wholeheartedly. They turned from being a nation receptive to the gospel to one that carte blanche rejected the gospel. And so what did He do? He began sending circumstances where they began to suffer. Because now their fertility deities, their demons that they worship, are not able to help them from starving. What's the only place they can turn, or to whom can they turn, that can turn the situation around? Only the God that created them, sustains them, and so forth. Or, like the people down there in Central America, we have Hurricane Mitch. Everybody needs to have their plants watered, but to have as much water as Hurricane Mitch. But why? Those people worship voodoo deities. They worship the devil. They're animists and so forth. And so oftentimes God uses an overabundance of logistical grace, too much sun, too much rain, to punish people and groups of people. However, the norm of logistical grace is to send the sun and the rain in proper amounts to keep the human race alive to resolve the angelic conflict. So believer and unbeliever alike gets to enjoy logistical grace. Do you suppose unbelievers ate today and drank today? Do you suppose they enjoyed the taste of the food and the fullness of the food and the health that it brought? Of course they did. Did they thank God for it? No, they don't care. But was it God's providence that said it? Yes, it was. All right, let's go on. By the way, the more blessings you have, the more culpable you are. Acts chapter 14. Acts chapter 14. Now, once again, you're going to see that God even blesses idolaters. The idolaters attribute their abundant harvests, big herds, to fertility deities. But despite that, God still sustained them through logistical grace. These people here were idolaters. Verse 15. Sirs, why do ye these things? We're men of like passions, and preach to you that you turn from these vanities, that is, the idols, unto the living God that made heaven, earth, the sea, and all things that are therein. He made the food for you. He made the water for you, and so forth. In times past, He suffered all nations to walk in their own ways. Nevertheless, verse 17, He left not Himself without witness, in that He did good. The word good there is a reference back to God's providence. He didn't create them just to damn them. And if they're ever going to have an opportunity, His providence is going to have to keep them alive in the angelic conflict. He's not going to allow Lucifer simply to crush the human race and end it all. God is going to keep the thing going with His omnipotence. And gave us rain from heaven, fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with gladness. All right, and bellies with food, by the way. Acts chapter 17. Two verses here in this portion that are logistical grace blessings enjoyed by all men regardless of their spiritual status. You enjoyed logistical grace today, and you're a believer. But unbelievers enjoyed it as well. And it wasn't luck that brought it to them. As you're reading in these verses, it was God. Despite their idolatry, despite their rejection, despite their hatred of God, God still shows His goodness and concern for the human race in sending them logistical grace blessings. Neither, verse 25, is worshipped with men's hands, as though He needed anything. Seeing He gives life and breath and all things, meaning to the human race. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. He gave them life, He sustains them with breath. All things has to do with logistical grace. Unbelievers have clothes. Unbelievers have cars. Unbelievers have jobs. Unbelievers have houses. Unbelievers have a measure of health. Unbelievers have bread on their table and so forth. But where did it come from? Despite what they think, God is the one who in actuality provided it, not some pseudo-supernatural force that is overseeing them that they pay homage to. Verse number 28. The Apostle Paul says, "For in him we live and move and have our being," our ongoing existence. So the first three things here are enjoyed by all men. Now, we're not going to investigate greater grace. I'm just simply going to mention it. Greater grace has to do with the incremental blessings that you get as you mature in the Lord. Now, by the way, often we only think of blessings in the material realm. The material will come. I remember Debbie Harrington said that she wanted a diamond, a big diamond, when she gets to the Bema seat. Well, that will come. She probably is never going to have a big diamond this side of glory, unless she plants and waters the one that she has. Perhaps it'll grow. I don't know. But despite that, she probably won't have one. But greater grace says that if you mature in the Lord this side of glory, there will be those rewards the other side of glory, where neither moth nor rust doth eat, nor thief break through and steal. They are permanent, secure, prosperous blessings that you don't have now, but you will have then. But if you had them now, you couldn't keep them. But if you get them then, you can keep them forever. That's the kicker. That's the glory of it. So, greater grace blessings are those blessings that are directed toward the inner man. As you mature and have capacity to enjoy these blessings, as God sends them your way, He'll give you greater grace. All these other blessings are enjoyed by believer and unbeliever alike. By the way, this past week you had a carnal spasm. You had a royal hissy fit, but you went right out and probably bought a hamburger and French fries and a shake just to pacify you because you had this. Well, what was that? You were out of the will of God, but yet you enjoyed something that the providence of God provided for you, logistically. As you were having the royal hissy and allowing the old sin nature to take over, Jesus Christ was still sustaining you bodily. That's His providence. And why look towards something like luck, which is random? You never know. It's inconsistent. You never know when it's going to smile on you, shine its light on you. Lady Luck is going to accompany you, when you can have Jesus Christ who holds you together despite yourself. I like that. And that's what providence does. And providence has incorporated greater grace blessings, superabundant blessings for those who will mature. You may not see them now, but couched in your soul, in your human spirit, there they are, the potential. The MPR formula, the maximum potential for righteousness, is there. All right, but before we go on, lest you say, well now, Pastor, wait one second here. I wouldn't mind being Donald Trump for a day. I wouldn't mind being some of the wealthiest men, Bill Gates, for a year or so. Well, that's true. We all look at that and say, well, that would really be nice. Have all that money, have all that worldly security, to have all the supposed happiness that brings, relaxation and so forth. For me, it'd be difficult to have so much money and I'll have to live behind wired fences and walls and have bodyguards all the time for fear that somebody would come steal your children for a ransom or what have you. But that's them and not me. I'll get my greater grace blessings, hopefully. Let's turn to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. Now, again, I am not saying that if God sends a windfall your way, that you do not say, "Thank you, Lord, I've been blessed." Thank you that the piano fell there, but the money fell here. I've been blessed. Nothing wrong with that. If God promotes you, if God prospers you, you have been promoted and prospered. If God sees fit to channel this your way. But I'm talking about being obsessed with that sort of thing. Keeping your mind focused on that sort of thing. It's not all that it is purported to be. And the reason is because of these two laws. We're going to call the first law vertical forfeiture. The second law we'll call horizontal retribution. Now, here we are in Luke chapter 12, and it's a very familiar parable. In fact, we're going to look at these two parables, both in the book of Luke, and Jesus Christ talks about wealth, and then he talks about hell. He spake a parable unto them, this is verse 16, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. So here is a guy who is undoubtedly trusting in luck. The reason that we know that, he says within himself, "What shall I do because I have no room where to bestow my fruits?" Hey, I put my money down and let it ride on a certain number, and it just kept hitting, and there I am. "This will I do. I'll pull down my barns and build greater. There I'll bestow all my fruits and goods. And I'll say to my soul," remember the evil boast of the men this morning, the book of James and others. I'm going to make a boast that I'm going to live not just tomorrow, but for a whole year. And I'm going to go apart from the will of God to a certain city, and I'm going to invest and do certain things, and I'm going to get gain there. And James says you shouldn't do that. That is evil boasting, evil surmising. You're attempting to get more logistical grace blessing than your share apart from the will of God. You want all of this, but you don't want Him. All such boasting is evil. For him who knows to do right and does it not, to him it's sin. You should say, if the Lord will, not if fate will, if luck will, if the Lord will, we'll go here, buy and sell, and get gain. But here's a guy who said, I'm going to say to my soul, soul, you have have lunch. I was thinking of luck again, and so you have much goods laid up for many years. I'm going to live this long. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Thou fool, this night your soul is going to be required of thee. Then who shall those things be which you have provided? Okay, so here it is. Vertical forfeiture. He spent all that time looking to worldly and material things to satisfy him. Satisfy was what? His soul. Soul, you've got much goods laid up for many years. However, his substance was all here on the earth, and his soul was required of him. It was taken into another dimension. It was taken out of the physical into the spiritual realm. And note what Jesus said in verse number 21. So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Whose are those things now? You own them, but now your soul is gone. Who is going to enjoy that substance for many years? It's not going to be you, because you didn't lay up anything for God. You're going to be brought into eternity, and you are going to be bankrupt in every single way. It's the law of vertical forfeiture. You can't keep it because you didn't get it in the will of God. Okay, let's go to chapter 16. where Jesus gives us another picture. Verse 19. Now remember, these are kingdom portions, and kingdom believers have to sell all as a proof that they believe, but the principle is the same. There was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen, and he fared sumptuously every day. In other words, God allowed him to have more logistical grace blessings than others. There was a certain beggar named Lazarus. And by the way, please remember that sometimes there are exceptions to the rule. The kingdom believers were not to beg, they were to have enough. God would provide for them. But here was a case where God allowed one, Lazarus, to be a beggar to test the rich man. There was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores. He desired to be fed just simply from the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Now, evidently, he didn't get much from this rich man, who, according to kingdom blessings, should have provided for Lazarus. He should have been a believer. Proof that he believed was giving of his substance to Lazarus under the kingdom concept. But the dogs came and licked his sores. It came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried, and in hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments. Now, we know the dialogue here. He saw Lazarus in his bosom, and he said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus that he might dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I'm tormented in this flame. Well, what did Abraham say to him? He gives us the law of horizontal retribution. Things are different now from the way they were on earth. The rich man fared sumptuously every day. Logistical grace blessings were sent to him. Lazarus didn't have much but crumbs and a couple of old hound dogs to keep him company. Note what Abraham said. Son, remember, you in your lifetime received your good things. Just because the unbeliever has a large amount of logistical grace blessing is really meaningless to the point it's irrelevant. He can enjoy them, but if he's not going to allow himself to recognize their source, honor their source, pray to their source, praise their source, God himself, then it's going to be a source of punishment in eternity future. You receive good things, likewise Lazarus evil things. Note the last phrase here. Now, he is comforted and you are tormented. So, on the one side, now he is comforted. He wasn't, but he still was obviously a believer, and he maintained his testimony for the Lord, though he was in a weakened, poor state. This man was rich, but never became a believer, and never would give up his wealth in order for the kingdom gospel. Note what it says. You, however, are tormented. Things have changed. And so there are two laws. One, vertical forfeiture. Your substance is still on the earth, but guess where you are? In hell. The other is, this is how you had it, but now, those who did without. And think about it. Think about us here, generally speaking. When you talk about the world and its pursuit of the material and us, they would think us crazy. You know, for the most part here, we give a percentage of our, so some 10% and more, a percentage of what we earn in life. Now, if it's, say, $20,000, you realize that's $2,000? The world would say, you know, that's crazy. To give up that amount of money and give it to a church for the ongoing support of the gospel, that's nuts. Boy, what I could do with $2,000. I could have a television. I could have a computer. I could have a car. I could do this. You know, it would serve as a down payment on this, that, and the other. You are crazy. They take their logistical grace blessings and waste them on the material and never invest anything in the spiritual. And that's why I'm showing you these laws. They might have more. Obviously, they're going to have a percentage more than you have. You give it back to the Lord. Sure, they're going to have more things in life. See all I've got? Yeah, I see what you've got. Isn't that great? Well, yeah, it depends on how you look at it. If you've taken and stolen from God, if you've not invested in your eternal future, you know what's going to happen? That computer is going to be on the computer desk when you die and slip into eternity. That computer is not going to save you. That car is not going to save you. And guess what? You know how we had a little less and you had a little more? It's coming the time when we're going to be comforted and rewarded to the maximum, and you're going to be tormented to the maximum. It's just not worth it. It's best to view your material things and put them in the proper perspective. Okay, we've got just a few minutes left. Let's go back here to Psalms chapter 37. Give a large portion of your livelihood. What you could do with all of that money. Yeah, that's true. We're nuts. We're crazy. And the sweetest words in eternity future to me are going to be, I told you so. Now, in case somebody is saying, I don't know, sometimes I just long for and yearn for that. Well, it's true. There's nothing wrong with wanting God to bless you and to have that kind of, say, monetary support. But you can't envy the people that have it if God doesn't send it to you, and you can't let it get you down or disappoint you. Verse 1. Fret not yourself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass, and wither as the green herb. I mean, what happens to the grass? Well, it's up one day, says the Apostle Peter. The sun comes up, and it burns it. It withers away. It doesn't keep its lush appearance, doesn't keep its vitality. However, trust in the Lord and do good, so shall you dwell in the land. And note, verily thou shalt be fed. God is going to provide. Delight thyself also in the Lord. He'll give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way unto the Lord. Trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. Now that is the point with regard to all of this. You cannot control your future. There are some things that you can do that will help you toward controlling a future. But as far as all of the incidentals, you cannot do it. But there is someone who can. And the person who can, of course, is God himself. Commit your way to him, trust in him, and your future will fall into place in his plan and provision, and so that he can get the glory for sustaining your life. Underneath are the everlasting arms. He's promised to uphold us. He's promised to meet all of our needs according to his riches and glory.